All right. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. We will officially call the 2021 operating budget hearing meetings to order. And if we could, Sarah, let's have everyone that's in attendance. Let's just call the entire council roll, and then we can put on the record who all is in attendance, please.
Sure. Baylor.
Aye.
Connor.
Aye.
Freeman.
Aye.
Fusco. Kamer.
Aye.
Lombardo.
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Malik.
Aye.
Neal. Amobian.
Aye.
Samples.
Aye.
Somerville.
Aye.
Swirsky. Looks like we have everyone except for Fusco, Neal, and Swirsky.
Okay, very, very good. Well, thanks each and every one of you for being here. Tara, I trust you're writing and not driving. Okay, good, good. All right, we for the next three days, we will be meeting at 3 o'clock each day. We would like to try to wrap every day up at 5 o'clock, just being mindful that some folks might be staying over as a result of these meetings, but we're going to be looking to Mr. Fricker to give us a lot of direction here throughout the days. I would ask, as we've done in the past years, if we can confine our questions to budget questions, because we all know it's real easy to start to ask questions about program and whatnot. So if we can just keep our questions restricted to questions around the budget. And I would also ask if you would have perhaps a question that we cannot answer during the meetings, Mr. Fricker, if it's all right, if folks just go ahead and send those inquiries to you, and then we would be able to have all those questions answered before we would actually come to council to approve this budget.
Correct. Yes. Thank you. And we will keep a log of all those questions as we typically do, and then submit those via email out to the various council members, after we get those questions answered.
Okay, very good. And I would ask if you do have a question, if you would use the raised hand feature. If I miss you, I'm going to rely on Miss Biviano to point out my oversight. And with that, Mr. Fricker, could you start us here?
Absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Welcome to the 2021 operating budget hearings. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce some other people from the finance department. So obviously you all know Shelley Goodrich, who's our deputy finance director. We also have with us Cindy Donnell, who's our audit and budget manager, and Michael Wheeler, who is our audit and budget supervisor, both of which were heavily involved and did the bulk of the legwork on putting the budget together. Along with, we have 3 other employees in our budget division that also worked very hard on these budgets. This year with the implementation of Workday and everything that was going on with COVID-19, it was a very challenging year. And I couldn't be more proud of our budget team for getting this budget put together under very trying circumstances. So I just want to give them a shout out for how hard they worked this year. Okay, and so today I believe we're going through 4 different departments, or actually 5 different departments. So we have the mayor's office, we have our Office of Integrated Development, our safety department, and as well as police and fire. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the mayor, who's going to go through some things with the various budgets from the mayor's office and the CARES Act.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. But kind of to segue just a little bit, some of us are of a different age, obviously, and as they lower the age number for that vaccine, if you all are looking for them, I don't know what some of your thoughts are, but please, there are obviously some excellent clinics, access points doing an excellent job in getting those vaccines out, as is the health department. So as you're looking to sign up, I know they're trying to find as many people as possible, given if and when you want it. But before I go forward, it is a very special day. It is actually Councilman Lombardo's birthday. So if you can please wish him happy birthday. He's, I'm not going to say how old he is, but it's his birthday today. So anyway, I'll just spend a few minutes talking about a couple of things that I think are highlighted. Steve kind of understated a little bit to say that 2020 was a challenge in putting the budget together. Really, I think that goes across the city, and a lot of work goes to, and a lot of credit goes to, the people that live in this city and all of you who continue to make it work under very difficult circumstances, to say the least. And this really happened throughout the country. So one of the things that we're able to help us through is that we found some partners in the federal government through last year in CARES Act funding. And how that came about is, there was specific Treasury guidance, there was specific state guidance, there was specific county guidance about how we could use those CARES Act dollars. And we tried to be as judicious as possible to make sure all of those services that we still have still continue to function. Because obviously we made some strategic moves right around a year ago today, or a year ago next week, to try to save money to be able to get through. Obviously, there is still a significant amount of unemployment. All of the assumptions that Steve will probably go through when it comes to expected funding later, all of the assumptions that you can think of, whether it's a future help from more of the federal government or the state government, this budget was put together without any of those into consideration. If somebody's going to come down the pike and say, hey, listen, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of money in July, we're not putting a budget together in March for the rest of the year with that in mind, knowing that things may change at some particular point, but having that flexibility to do so. But being a trying time, and using those CARES Act dollars, and we will share those documents with you. And I'm not sure if Shelley can share the screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Sarah, can I share? Oh, yep, there we go. Hold on one second.
And as you're looking at this, you'll get a copy of this. So as you're looking at this, you may say to yourself, well, hey, what about this or what about that? There was obviously, and quite frankly, when the first CARES Act dollars rolled out, you had legislative intent and the agency implementation, and it was considerably different. The Treasury was telling us, hey, you could use it this way. And the agency or the legislatures were saying, hey, you could use monies this way. And actually the agencies were saying, hey, listen, you can't use it that way. So we did go round and round a lot about what we can use those CARES Act dollars, but providing those key city services in and around business support and payroll support for all of that to keep those city services functioning were a very high priority for us. Given that, as we rolled over until the end of the year, and actually, I know Mr. Neal had mentioned this a while back, and Mayor of Columbus and I, and various mayors across the state of Ohio, were talking about different programs and how we can use some of those CARES Act dollars. And the idea was is to have more council input, quite frankly. And so as we were putting together the last parts of those CARES Act dollars, we had decided, you all have come to the administration, with a lot of different priorities about different groups that need funded. And so one of the line items that you will see for some of the remaining CARES Act dollars, we have some budgeted for payroll, some budgeted for small business assistance. There's still some infrastructure around IT, because quite frankly, when we all needed to go remote, we didn't necessarily have the infrastructure. In fact, many cities didn't necessarily have the infrastructure to say, hey, listen, we can go remote, we can be safe, and we can still do the job. So we had to make an investment into some of those things so some people can still work remotely. And as we assess that, it's still the things that we needed to be able to do that too. But one of those last allocations of those CARES Act dollars was one of those. It was $1 million in a line item for councils. It's not necessarily council's discretion, but you all have groups in your wards that need support. And I'll give you just a couple of examples. And there's going to be some specifics about how this can be used. You can't, for example, we just can't give people money. These have to be to nonprofits. They have to be, they have to be formed before at the beginning of last year or before 2020. And if I get, one of my facts wrong, I know Shelley's going to jump in and kind of correct me, but there is specific guidance, but there's a lot of groups out there in your wards that maybe we don't know about that you do, that do need some of that help. And I'll give you one example. I know they've been doing food giveaways in Ward 5 right there at the corner of 5th and Arlington and Greater Bethel, along with another church. And we have supported the police department and we have supported with CARES Act dollars, some Akron police officers helping with the food giveaway and helping with traffic. Some of those things we may not know about if they don't call and ask, but you may know about. So one of those last parts of those dollars, we're going to ask you to identify and come up with those groups who may need some of that support to do that. And it is, I think, a good way to be able to get that money out on the CARES Act. There's still some stipulations, and you're going to have a ton of questions. I get it. And I would ask that maybe you kind of save them and then you can use that for the log to be able to do it, because I don't necessarily want to take up all of that time, but just let you know that we're going to allocate $1 million into the wards, into the groups that you identify. And quite frankly, the clock is ticking because we only have until the end of this year to be able to spend this money. And we don't usually have those kind of stipulations. That's something that the agencies put on us. But we feel it's very important that you connect with those groups and be able to help them out as much as you can also. And so as we do this and you come up with those questions, obviously they'll have to go through a criteria of how they can be used. And we will help you through that. In fact, we're more than willing to be creative with it, but we got to be creative with knowing that it's going to be audited 2 or 3 times. One through the county because they were the pass-through, the state auditors and the Treasury Department. So there's still a lot of stipulations, but we still have some of those things that we need to mitigate with COVID to be able to make a difference in some of those, in those lives of people that live in your wards and that we all represent. So I ask you to take some time to digest it, but don't take too long because we do want to get this up and running fairly quickly. But we all thought it was a very good use of those, that you're able to connect with those groups and be able to make a difference in a lot of those that may not have seen us for a while. So I'll stop there. I'm more than happy to take them, but I don't want to take the time to do that because it is specific. So take the time, figure out some questions, make them part of that log, and then we'll kind of go from there. But that's kind of it for my spiel in the beginning. Mr. Chairman, Madam President, I appreciate the time to be able to explain that.
Yeah, I would reiterate what you're saying is that, wow, a bunch of questions are going to pop up for all of us. And if there's some kind of primer that we can look to give us guidance as we're looking for organizations and whoever that's going to be scheduled through, we'll need that time.
Well, yeah, we'll have that for sure. But like I said, this is a lot to digest right away. And I'm sure the questions are flowing. Make sure you write those down, maybe get them to Sarah on a log with that log to be able to do that. And we'll get those answers for you. But thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. And I think on a high level, we can go through, Shelley, even if you want to scroll back up and I'll hand it to you to kind of go through. We definitely wanted to do an overview of CARES first in terms of what was spent last year, what we have left to spend. And then as Mayor alluded to, utilizing council and your resources and your connections to better get the rest of some of that money into the community as well. So I think we can kind of go through a kind of quick synopsis of what has been spent so far, just so everyone can see and how we essentially had to spend that money, just to give everyone kind of a holistic overview. So Shelley, I'll pass to you for a sec.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today and allowing me to speak to you guys about this. I've been really hands-on with the CARES Act dollars, as has Steve. We've done a lot of research about what we can use them for. So we will definitely be the resource for you guys as we stand up this council program with you. Last year in 2020, we spent a little over $11 million on payroll support. This was money that was funded to us through Summit County. For the first round of distributions, we were not large enough to get a direct distribution. So the county received over $94 million. Of that, we received over $11 million, which then was used to offset our first responders payroll and to offset payroll expenses for police and fire. So we did receive over $19 million in distributions from the state of Ohio. Those came in through multiple distributions throughout the year last year. And we have expended some of those funds. So I wanted to go ahead and share with you how we've used those. We did some HVAC upgrades totaling almost $375,000, where we deployed some new equipment for into the fire stations in the buildings. filtration systems that purifies the indoor air quality, to make sure that our first responders and our city staff are safe, and that are the ones that are working on site are, the air is being, purified. So we do those upgrades as were recommended from us, to us. We did some small business grants. There's been a lot of small business grants in our community. Obviously, the chamber and the county poured millions of dollars into small business grants. We did a little bit as well with the Downtown Akron Partnership. These were grants specifically for downtown Akron businesses, and this was an additional program to offset the programs that were administered by the chamber, which we also assisted with. In Summit County, we assisted in administering the grant programs, but not providing financial support. We also purchased laptops. Up until recently, most of our employees had desktop computers. So when the pandemic started, we were really facing a challenge with being able to mobilize our employees. So we did purchase laptops. We are going to be purchasing more laptops because this is an area where we can't hand them out fast enough. We're having to have employees quarantine. We need them to be able to work from home. So we need laptops. So this has really allowed us to invest in some IT infrastructure and equipment to allow our workforce to be able to work remotely and to be able to socially distance and spread out. We also took some of the funds that the state provided and used that for payroll as well for public safety. And then we did do utility assistance grants. Currently, we have about $80,000 remaining in that bucket that's still available. So make sure you guys are always promoting the Akron Cares Utility Assistance Program. And also just a plug, Summit County Cares started yesterday. So Summit County, the application period has started. It's at summitcountycares.org. And they're offering rental and mortgage assistance as well as utility assistance. So I think it's going to be about a 2-week application period. We are doing our promotions from the city's perspective. We are trying to promote that to our utility customers as well. But I can send you guys information, but I want you to be aware that that program just launched yesterday. Summit County has millions more to give away in rent and mortgage and utility assistance. So this is what we spent in 2020. Over the next year, this is what we anticipate spending the remaining funds for: $1 million for the Council CARES Act program, $250,000 for purchase of additional laptop computers, and continuing to invest in our IT infrastructure so that our employees can remotely work. And then we're going to use additional $4 million for public safety payroll expenses. And then the remaining balance will be in small business assistance, PPE, and other miscellaneous community programs and assistance. So, and you guys, we will go ahead and email this document to you after the presentation today for your review. And we can take any questions that you guys may have at this time.
All right, Mr. Neal.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I do believe Madam President had her hand up first, though, sir.
Okay, beg your pardon, Ms. Somerville.
No, go ahead, Councilman Neal. You can go first.
Okay. Well, first I want to say thank you to the mayor and administration. Look forward to being able to see how we can best utilize this as council members. Madam President, I would like to suggest, since some of our colleagues in other cities did this last year, we may want to refer to them to what some of the best practices were and how successful they were in rolling out the funds as individual council members. I can tell you from my perspective, it worked when I did the city council grant, neighborhood grant. I look forward to working with the administration so that they can see how the collective work UJIMA process works, because I want to let the community decide how we utilize these funds in the community. But I did want to ask, these dollars are from last year. They don't come into account, because I know we got word through CED, this is National League of Cities week right now, that there's some American Rescue Plan funds that are coming. And I think our city's probably aligned for, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of at least $4 to $5 million there.
Yeah, these dollars are all from the CARES Act money that we received in 2020. So this is carryover dollars from last year, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Somerville.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that I plan to potentially probably hold a special meeting so that council can have more conversations as it relates specifically to City of Akron CARES Act Relief Program for council. That way we can talk about best practices, what is expected, and be very clear and detailed in terms of how these funds can be spent. So we will schedule that, okay? So that we can have further conversation.
Excellent. Sarah, any other hands raised? I'm on my iPad here. Mr. Malik.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the presentation, Ms. Goodrich. I first just want to echo Mr. Neal. Really appreciate this new program in terms of the $1 million City Council cares. I think that hopefully that we're all able to identify things, and definitely look forward to taking guidance from Columbus. But I guess my question was looking at the most of the allocation, not most, but a large amount of the allocation went to public safety payroll support, and kind of digging into it, it seems like that also was one of the key factors in last year being able to build up the reserves also to some degree, which seems very positive. But can you just kind of talk through how the determination's made of how much of that to use for public safety payroll support in 2021?
So we wanted to, as close as we could, get the 2021 general fund budget to be as balanced as we could. So we allocated $4 million of that money towards those payroll costs. It ended up that we didn't quite reach that balanced amount. We kind of committed those $4 million. As it turns out, we're going to draw less than $1 million probably, we think, with the general fund. But that was the basis for that, was to try to, as best we could, get the general fund in a balanced position.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, very good. Thank you. I think we're all encouraged to see we're going to be able to reach down a little bit more into our communities here. Mr. Fricker, let's proceed here.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn it over to Andy McFadden from the Chief of Staff's office for the mayor, and she's going to go through the mayor's office budgets. Okay,
thank you. Ms. McFadden?
Good afternoon, council members. As I've done in previous years, to kind of kick off the overall budget presentations at a high level view, I do want to go through the city strategic map. It gives everybody a sense for what mayor's strategic priorities are, and then how this budget kind of fits into all of that. And once we do our city strategic map, we encourage all our departments to make their own departmental maps based on those strategic priorities. So we really truly are all aligned. So I think all of you should have access to it. I'm happy to share my screen too, if that helps. Okay, can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, lovely. So I won't go through the thing in its entirety, but I do want to focus on our enterprise goals here as usual. The progress indicators below are kind of a good indication of these specific programs that we have aligned with these specific enterprise goals. So I'll kind of go over these priorities across the board. We did add one as compared to last year. So obviously last year was quite the anomaly, as we've been talking about. And we had 4 kind of strategic priorities before. We did add a specific priority regarding public health and safety. While that's always a priority of ours and kind of feeds into everything we do, we really pulled it out because we were obviously specifically targeting some extra public health and safety efforts last year. It took up a lot of our year, actually, just working through COVID-related items. So overall, I'll just go through the first bucket here is in regards to increased economic opportunity. So obviously, continuing to implement Elevate Akron is still a priority of ours, along with the chamber and the county. We're really delving into specific work around creating kind of equitable opportunity through the Elevate Akron program. The second is continuing to prioritize financial empowerment, especially after last year. This is going to continue to be a priority for people. I think that our Akron FEC did a phenomenal job of really kind of pivoting to virtual sessions and things like that. And they really made the best of it. But I think specifically as we kind of crawl out of this pandemic, I think these free financial services are going to be increasingly important as people are trying to catch up on rent, catch up on utilities, catch up on debt, and anything else that they may need help with. We also did hire a specific FEC liaison in Katie Breck. So she is now there full-time to kind of help really guide the FEC, build community partnerships, build corporate partnerships to really kind of continue to build out that program. Prioritizing entrepreneurship and innovation, obviously something that we're going to continue, focusing on our small businesses through our Great Streets program, continuing to work with Bounce on entrepreneurship activities. So that just continues to be kind of a leg of our economic development stool. Continue to support educational attainment, obviously a pretty crazy year for our schools as well. So we continue to partner with them heavily on trying to, make the best of what we can for our students. We're so happy that they're actually just getting back into school now. So our partnership there is still very strong, and along with, Stark State and University of Akron, just trying to do what we can to kind of, help them maintain during this time. And then finally, assess and improve our procurement process. As everybody knows, we've been working really diligently internally around improving our procurement process, diversifying our vendors. We were able to just hire full-time, and I believe she's on with us today, Sheena Fain. Sheena is our new diversity supplier and contract compliance officer. So we're really happy to have her here with us to really kind of dig in on some of the really good work of improving our procurement process and really setting up a database and getting everything coordinated to really truly diversify our vendors. So that's our economic opportunity priority list. In terms of improved public life, obviously, city-owned public spaces continues to be a priority of ours. I know OID has been working diligently on our parks, on our rec centers. And as we can see, our outdoor spaces are really, really vital to public health. I think last year absolutely proved that. So that's something that we're continuing to work on. Continue to communicate and engage with Akron residents. Obviously, that's something that's really important to Mayor. He really loves to be in the community. That was obviously a challenge last year. So we've really tried to diversify our communication staff, how we communicate, and mediums to do so. So that's always a priority. Continue to partner on our arts and culture plan and on public art. We recently stood up our Public Arts Commission last year, which was very exciting. So I think that's going to give the community some leverage to kind of submit for public art proposals, and we're working through funding mechanisms to do just that. So now we kind of have a hub to help promote public art in our city. Prioritizing inclusive mobility. This is something that OID has been working on as well. Obviously, we're working a lot on our road infrastructure. We're doing road diets. We're doing continued bike lanes, more walkable neighborhoods. That with safe sidewalks is really important. So we're really trying to think, and then partnering with Metro on how they can better leverage their services. So I think we're just trying to think a little more holistically about transportation outside of your traditional car, because not everybody has a car, as we know. And then obviously, finally, we're still working on our downtown development. We are in phase 2 of our Tiger right now. So we do have a section torn up, as I'm sure all of you know, right down by Market and Main. Not nearly the intensive program that Main Street phase 1 was. So we're hoping to make really a ton of progress on that this year and to really be able to fully open Main Street, within the year. So we're really excited about that. In terms of stronger neighborhoods, obviously improve road conditions. I know everybody loves this one, but we've really started to see the benefits of the income tax that we did pass in 17 and started collecting on 18. I think the constant, kind of elevation of how many miles of road we're able to pave every year has really started to be noticed by residents and hopefully our council people alike. So I know everybody's excited about that. Continuing to prioritize housing. That's something that, again, OID and planning have been working on diligently. I know we're going to release our 2.0 plan of our Continue to Grow Akron report. So I think that's going to really talk more about infill housing and continuing to prioritize our neighborhoods and kind of lift them up, combat blight, and just able to give our residents more access to improved housing, to rehab programs, to new housing options as well. Neighborhood business districts, as we know, we're really focused on our Great Streets efforts and continue to do that with our small businesses. I know Mayor's been really diligent about going out and doing plenty of visits, as has our OID staff, in terms of just seeing what the businesses need and really doing a lot of listening in terms of how we can help them. I know many of our council members do the exact same thing, so that continues to be a priority. As does our VBR program. As you guys know, we've seen some great success with that so far. We're starting to build up some funding there to really kind of get at some of our problem vacant buildings. So that's been a great program. And then just overall public safety infrastructure, again, with our safety and streets dollars that were passed in 17, we're continuing to work towards new fire stations, body worn cameras, new police vehicles, new fire truck ladders. So we're slowly chipping away at all those kind of backlogged capital needs that we have there. Public health and safety. Again, as I said, we kind of pulled this one out from last year because we spent plenty of time specifically, focusing on public health. And we're going to obviously continue to do that this year. So we've worked hand in hand with the county and our state governments throughout this whole process. I mean, I really think the mayor's office talks to the governor's office 2 to 3 times a week at least. We've had a really good open line of communication, and I think it's been really helpful. So much of the COVID efforts have been controlled at the state level, and I think that's just how Ohio has worked it. But we do feel like we have a voice in this, which I think is important, and the governor's been opening to listening to cities and their needs. So we hope to kind of continue that relationship. Obviously, our support work of racism as a public health crisis. We have our task force and the subcommittees that are up and running and meeting continuously. Cabinet members have been pretty active and involved in going through, info gathering, having discussions. So it's been hard work, but it's been really, really good work so far. So we're going to continue to kind of support our racial equity and social justice task force to get what they need to kind of come up with some good recommendations later this year. In tandem with that, we're still working on our full-term first birthday programming with our wonderful Tamika Rose at the helm. She's been doing amazing work at continuing to uplift that program, continuing to find new ways, especially through this pandemic, to specifically target pregnant mothers and their needs and what they're not getting throughout this pandemic, and really trying to make sure that they have a stable, healthy place to live and access to everything they need access to during that time. And then improving public safety strategic initiatives. Obviously, our city has seen a rise in violence last year, as did probably almost every city across the country. There was a lot of things built up, a lot of things bubbled over last year, and we're no stranger to that. And so some of our crime data dictated that. So we're thinking strategically about how we can invest in different police programs to better to be able to combat that. As we know, we just got a COPS grant, so we are hiring some additional officers and we're really hoping to kind of leverage more foot traffic with police officers in the neighborhoods to really kind of better engage in that capacity. And then finally, our internal operations and efficiencies. This one really has not changed for us. It's something that we just always keep an eye on, always looking to control expenses, to really kind of use technology. Obviously, we saw plenty of that last year with some of the investment we had to do and more IT infrastructure, and leverage the assets that we have. We're really focused, HR is focused on continuing to diversify our city workforces and really kind of strategic outreach efforts to keep our city workforce diverse. And monetizing our assets, and clearly still trying to work through our CSO project. We're hoping to submit possibly for a third amendment this year. So we're still working through how we can reduce those costs for our residents. We know that's, especially last year, continues to be a burden for people. So it's something that we're just very cognizant of and are continuing to work towards. So I know that was a lot all at once, but I really wanted to give everybody a high level view of kind of what's on our radar and how we try to focus our work and how we try to prioritize. So questions before I delve quickly into the mayor's office budgets?
Any questions for Ms. McFadden at the moment? All right, if you would please continue on, Annie.
Absolutely. The rest of this will be a little bit shorter. So I'm just going to go into the first page here of the mayor office administration budget. As Mr. Fricker alluded to when he kind of opened up, you will see some budget changes in terms of labor because again, we do have that extra pay period that's happening this year. So really that's some of the main changes that you'll see just in the mayor's office proper budget is going to be associated with that. And that's really all that is for the most part. We do have some changes as well. We did have a 2020 contract for our census coordinator. So we did have that last year. So that's one expense that we will not have this year. But again, the change doesn't look as different because we have that extra pay period. We did absorb the communications budget back into this. We kind of broke it out for a while, but they're very much intertwined. So this is all inclusive of mayor's office and mayor's office communications this year. Just for highlights, I am hoping that we can do a city magazine again this year. Ideally, I would like to have it printed and to really have something physical in people's hands that this year. Last year, obviously, it just didn't happen and things were moving so quickly that we could not even get something printed and have it viable. A month later, we can get it into people's hands. But we're hoping things settle down enough that we're really able to do that this year. And as if many of you may have noticed at this point, we usually would have had a state of city at this point. We have not yet. I think Mayor just kind of wanted to see how this year went. We knew vaccines were going to start to roll out quickly. He definitely wants to do one this year. So I think maybe more towards summertime, he is really looking to do some type of annual report to the city and kind of report out what's going on. So that's still on our radar. It is happening, but we just don't have a date yet. And we're trying to figure out the best course of action to do that. If we can do it in person, we would love to. Obviously, we want to make sure it's safe and appropriate to do that. So we'll keep everyone posted when that happens. So we do have some budget for that as well. Questions, comments on this? That is the crux of the changes you'll see.
All right, looking for questions or comments. And during this time, we just take questions or comments. If you're a member of Budget Finance or your committee or your council person, just please feel free. Okay, I do not see anything.
Okay, then I will go to Labor Relations. Should be your next page. Again, very much the same. The main budget change just is partially reflective of the extra pay period. And then we did hire Frank Williams last year to come into the fold. He came in partially through last year. So this is just going to be reflective of the first full year of both Randy Briggs and Frank Williams in there as well. And then we also do have some rental space. You'll see rentals and leases. We do have a rental space in Ocasek. They moved to that office over there. So that would be the main changes there.
Say that again. Who's in Ocasek?
Labor Relations.
Okay.
Yes. Questions, comments? Okay.
I see Mr. Malik's hand.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. McFadden. The $100,000 in current expenditures out there, what does that reflect?
That's for Jim Masturzo's contract. We don't always use the whole entirety, as you can see, but that is the majority of his contract that he's had for a number of years now.
Okay, I guess, one thought is I definitely understand kind of the institutional memory and transition, that in bringing Mr. Williams on board. But can you kind of talk through what the expected kind of or time frame or future kind of outlook for this office is going forward?
We haven't talked about it internally yet. I mean, obviously, there will be some retirements at some point, but I mean, there's institutional knowledge is extremely important, obviously, when it comes to labor relations. So we just want to make sure we have plenty of overlap, and there has been plenty of work to do. I mean, especially with last year with the heavy lift that the HR had, that labor relations had, that law had, with all the moving parts that were happening last year. It was really welcome extra set of hands to kind of get through exactly what we needed to. Now that, again, we're starting to right the ship a little bit, I think that'll be more of a discussion this year.
All right, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? All right, Mr. Lombardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. McFadden, I was following you on the chart as far as strength and grow our population document. And what document are you on now for following you? I've got
Oh,
about
I'm
3 of
starting
them.
into the budget documents. I don't have pages. I'm sorry if you guys do. I don't have
Yeah.
page numbers.
It's the 200 some odd page document, right?
Yeah. So
Correct,
yeah. So the
yeah.
very first budget document should be the
Yeah.
mayor's office administration.
Right, got it.
Yep. And then page 2 is labor relations that we just went through now.
All right, my page 2 was
Apologies, I
planning
don't
and
have page 2
safety.
on the book you guys have, but yes.
Okay. All right, my page 2 was planning and safety, but the next page is like police. Is that right?
Well, I think you may be looking at the list, Councilman Lombardo. There should be as you said, I believe it's around 200 pages. That should be in that order. And there's just so you're following along, there's
Like a Word document?
No, it should be a PDF. Yeah. Yeah, I think you may be looking at the goals and objectives, it sounds like, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Mr. Lombardo would probably want to refer back to what you'd sent out here a few days ago.
Steve, do we want to have someone share their screen to show the pages as we go through or not?
Probably wouldn't be a bad idea.
Right. That's fine. I could show you where we're talking here, but I know some of the departments have like PowerPoints and things they're looking to do, but let me share the document that we're on right
Councilman
now.
Lombardo, I just emailed you the link. I don't know if you have access to your city email, but I did email you the link.
Got it. Yeah, that's the document I was looking at. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay. Yeah, so this is the budget document. This is page 1-1. And for those of you following along, right here is when we refer to the page number, this is going to be what we're referring to. So this is labor relations, and then the third page will be the police auditor.
Do we need to go through anything else with labor? Can you go to labor relations real quick, Steve? Any more questions on that?
Yep.
Okay. If we're good, then we'll just go to police auditor as the final one under my purview. Okay, so this is Mr. Phil Young's budget. As I think many of you may know, we did up Phil's hours last year, so you'll see that reflective here. So his 2021 budget is more robust, and then again, in addition, we're going to have that that extra pay period. So that is really the crux of the changes from Phil Young. Phil, do you have anything else you want to add or discuss? It's pretty basic.
No, I'm just glad you're here.
I'm glad you're here.
Hey, Phil, only because I used to joke with you in the past about all the administrative help that you had, tongue in cheek. You see this as being able to supplement and help your work here in the coming year?
Yes, anything is an improvement.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Well, we appreciate what you do, and I know that you probably had your hands to keyboard more than you ever desired to do that, but hopefully that'll be alleviated somewhat.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All righty. We want to proceed?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Malik. Okay, there we go. And then I see Ms. Samples, I see your hand as well.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
Mr. Malik.
Ms. McFadden, thank you. Obviously this role has been, an important, area of focus over the last year. It was something that we talked about a lot in our Reimagining Public Safety, particularly in our accountability working group. And, I know that, when Mr. Young, since he started in 2007, he had been at 20 hours for most of that time, and has not had administrative support for most of that time. I know there were several years in which he had an intern, and definitely, appreciate that he was moved up, I believe, to 30 hours. One of the things in talking through it in our working group was, and I'm going to read from the report that we had. We said, one person cannot adequately audit a department of 458 officers. The auditor's office would be much more effective with 3 positions: an auditor, a deputy auditor, investigator, and an administrative assistant or communications assistant to help with office management and community engagement. I know that the Mayor's Task Force Criminal Justice Subcommittee has been discussing this as well, and I believe are going to make similar recommendations regarding trying to have at least 3 full-time staff. So I guess, as you guys think through this internally, what is the thought process in terms of trying to have, full-time for Mr. Young, a full-time administrative assistant, and, as we talk about, again, kind of institutional memory and transition planning, potentially also a deputy auditor full-time?
Right. I mean, and that can absolutely be part of the discussion. We know you guys did some heavy lifting with looking into this, and we know that the task force is taking it up as well. So we, we're leaving Phil as is right now, obviously, because the discussion is still being had. So I think that's all part of what comes out between your recommendations and the task force recommendations and where we go with it. I think Mayor's always been said that he's happy to have that discussion, and we're happy to take it up further. I just think, and we can always make it a budget adjustment if something, comes out towards the end of the year. So I think that's perfectly appropriate. I just think we didn't want to assume or allocate for something when the task force is still taking a look at it as we speak. So I think that's where we stand with it right now, but happy to have further discussions as more reporting comes out.
Thank you so much. And I think, hopefully it's something that we can address, by the end of the month, by the time we pass this budget. But appreciate obviously the openness and the willingness to go through the process. I think going through the process is often the most important part. I know that the task force has been dealing with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mosley Samples.
Thank you, Chairman Freeman. Just piggybacking off what Councilman Malik just stated, just seeing where we are with staff for Young. I know since I've been on council, it's come up every budget cycle about getting him some assistance in that department. I know we're waiting on recommendations to come out of our various committees, but this is something that predates even these committees and recommendations that we are waiting to come forth. So I just want us to be intentional when we think about how we're allocating funds and getting him some help in that department, because it has to be a lot for one person to handle. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I think we're all like-minded on that. I don't know order-wise if we have Ms. Somerville or Mr. Neal. Ms. Somerville, I'm sure Mr. Neal, being the gentleman that he is, would have you go right ahead. So go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Again, just want to speak in favor of conversation regarding police auditor. Our criminal justice task force has been doing a phenomenal job. In fact, they will probably be the first committee of the task force that is ready to bring forth some recommendations, and their recommendations are specifically related to the police auditor. So we are going to arrange for the task force subcommittee group to come before council and give their recommendations as it relates to the position of the police auditor. Again, some of the recommendations are talking about increasing the hours for the police auditor from 30 to 40 hours and providing Phil with the very much needed administrative support. So again, we will have further conversations as it relates to the police auditor and providing Mr. Young with some additional support that he needs in order to do his job.
Thank you. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Most of my colleagues have spoke. I just wanted to echo what Councilwoman Sample said. I mean, this is something that since there's been an auditor, we've been talking about, and I respect the work of any of the committees, but we know that all budgetary items like this fall in our lap. So I would hope that if there is a committee that's ready to report, we expedite them coming before us, because I'd like for us to be able to address this, as some of my colleagues said, as soon as possible. Some of these things are just basic, one man, 450 something officers, no part-time, no help. I think some of those things we can act on and then make any adjustments based on, the different task force suggestions. But I think many of us can kind of decipher based on the information that's been shared already what we need to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I would just say again to you, Phil, I can remember back when we didn't have Phil Young, and I know you've carried a lot of weight for a lot of years, and I'm just real grateful, for the work of the committee and a group of folks saying, yeah, we need assistance here. So that's our word of thanks to you, and know that you have our support. I'm looking around for any other hands. Mr. Neal again, or did you not put your hand down from the first time?
I did have one thing. I think something that would be a good practice for us on council is, after we go through this budget, taking a look and at least looking at what suggestion we would make as far as funding this right now. Of course, it'd have to be some reallocation. This would be a good practice for us. We know that this is going to happen. We want it to happen sooner rather than later. The money's going to have to come from somewhere. This would be a good practice for us to work with the administration and identify some line items right off the rip. That would be my suggestion, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, have I missed anyone, Sarah? Okay. All right,
Sarah,
we'll move right
Sarah,
on.
we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Your sound is not working.
I could read her lips, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
I just made a little adjustment here. I didn't think I was muted. I don't see any other hands raised right now.
Okay. Okay, very good. Well, let's continue on then. Thank you for all those comments. Very constructive.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions for the mayor's office, that concludes their budgets. The next department up would be the Office of Integrated Development, and James Hardy.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Chairman, how are you today, sir?
Good. Are you, I'm looking for you here. Are you walking or are you?
No, I'm seated. I'm seated. It's like 100 degrees in my office for some reason today. So I'm seated. I'd like to share a brief overview of our work plan, just to give you, it's certainly not all inclusive, but would like to do that if that's okay.
Please.
Here we go. Can you all see that?
Yes.
All right. Apologies, it doesn't look very nice, but the content is wonderful. So I'll go just division by division really quickly. And then again, like we always do, we can go page by page, however it pleases the committee and council. But our development division is focused on some, and again, this is not an all-inclusive list, but continuing with land management and land redevelopment, whether that's vote to own, lot for little, our top 50 sites, working on new site development, all of those types of things. And that's where Abe Westcott and his team really work hard on that. We're breaking ground this year on Ald Farms, Residences at Good Park, and the City Center project. So we have some really good news coming out of the pandemic there. Entrepreneurship, ecosystem building, and small business focus. It's really headed up by Heather Rothcheck and her team. We talked a little bit in the previous proposal or previous presentation about Bounce, but it's even beyond Bounce. It's the Akron Resiliency Fund that Akron City Council helped to lead on the creation of during COVID, building that fund up, focusing intently on Black entrepreneurship as a way to grow the economy. So we're working very hard on grant applications right now on how we can further build that. And then, anything we can do to help our small businesses emerge. You heard from Ms. Goodrich, we still have plans to get some CARES Act dollars on the streets and into the hands of our struggling small businesses. The Akronite app, which just continues to grow. We now have over 4,500 users on the app every day, swiping their cards at local businesses and earning cash back that they can then spend and reinvest in the community. The Ohio Site Inventory Program, which is run by Jobs Ohio. This is also something that our development division works hard on. Again, looking at those sites where we can locate business expansions, business relocations, et cetera. We're also planning an in-person developers exchange, God willing, to really cast our net beyond the usual suspects and really start to see within a 2-hour drive shed of the city of Akron, how we can get new investment and new development interested in the opportunities we have in the city. Our BRE, our Business Retention and Expansion Division, led by the incomparable Sam DeShazer and Brad Beckert, they continue to work triage. I mean, I put that in all caps for a reason. I mean, we are not out of the woods yet. It's going to be a lot of work hand-holding our businesses to try and keep them afloat. And this team, this mighty team of 3 people, are out there working their tails off every single day, long hours. Proactive, reactive business outreach is part of that. So we haven't given up on our plans to develop deep and long-lasting relationships with our employers and our middle market firms in particular, and they continue to do that on top of everything else. They're working as part of Elevate Akron 2.0 on a joint business resources website. We were so successful with the joint COVID resources site for businesses that we think maybe there's something we can do to build off of that and have something more permanent. Our econ that works for Sam is actually working with Harvard Kennedy School right now. They offered for free to help us do a landlord survey that's out in the field right now using the data that we had from the rental registry and other sources to really get a sense for what our landlords are thinking. Are they keeping their rentals occupied? Are they not? Are they planning to evict? Are they not? What's the estimated back rent that's due? And Harvard's going to help us to really aggregate that data and be a pilot city for trying to get proactively ahead of the curve with the looming housing crisis that's coming. And so BRE took that on, their econ, David Mester, who's doing a wonderful job. They too are also working on the Ohio Site Inventory Program. Again, one of our missions in OID is no silos. So you're going to see some stuff show up a lot on multiple screens. So they work hand in glove with Abe and his team on making sure that we have and are putting our best foot forward with Jobs Ohio and Team Neo and our local businesses for expansion and relocation sites. And then these guys are our project management team. So when we do get a fish on the hook, they're the ones that bring it home. And they do an incredible job at that. Our planning, both our long-range planning division and zoning division, we are engaged, as some of you know, in the Summit Lake Land Use Plan, which just kicked off this month. We own a significant amount of land, as you all know, as does the land bank. And so we are going to be co-creating with the residents there a plan for what we want to do long-term with that land. And so far, the meetings have been incredible and inspiring, and we hope to continue that. In conjunction with that, AMHA received a planning grant for choice neighborhoods, which is the new phraseology for what you may remember as Hope 6 or some of the other large scale redevelopments that we've done of public housing in the city. It's really the first step in getting catalytic dollars from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to completely renovate and perhaps rebuild the public housing along Summit Lake. Planning to Grow Akron 2.0, the rollout and implementation of that. We hope to be doing that here shortly. We're still refining some things. COVID has really created an evolving situation when it comes to housing, and we want to make sure that when we do roll out the next iteration of our housing strategy, that it's as relevant as possible. So we're still targeting sort of a March, April rollout for that. It may, I'll just be honest, it may slide to the first week of May, but my goal is end of April at the latest. We continue with zoning code reform, the form-based overlays that you've seen Mike and Jason bring, a lot of the other aspects of updating and modernizing our zoning code, and we hope to have a better and stronger dialogue with council about that. In this coming year, we have the Merriman Valley Master Plan, the Kaboom Partnership, Parks Challenge is coming back. We're in the second year of our partnership with AARP and the Senior Citizens Commission for Age Friendly. Something I'm super excited about, and Helen and I could not be more excited about this, and you are hearing it first, ladies and gentlemen. We were able to receive some significant one-time money, as you know, through the CARES Act for homelessness planning. And I asked Helen over the holidays to download her brain to me as it relates to homelessness. And it was really an experience to be brought up to speed. We've never had a real hard and true and fast strategic plan for homelessness. We're going to correct that starting this year. So we're really excited that we're going to use some of those dollars working with our COC and with the city leading the way to create a homelessness strategic plan. And then obviously, as you all know, this team works day in and day out to implement the capital improvement plan and to continue planning for next year. And obviously all the HUD compliance that comes with that work. Development engineering, Michelle DeFiore's shop. They really steward Great Streets Akron, although planning does an awful lot on the funding side and helps with that tremendously. Michelle has also turned into really our star around project management when it comes to getting some of these big catalytic things out of the capital budget that we've been working with you on. So the Summit Lake Park renovation, Lock 3 renovation, the city pool renovations, and the community center reinvestment program. That's all Michelle out there as the lead, pulling together what's needed internally and externally to effectuate those changes. She's also working with John Malish and others on the tree canopy and the tree planting strategy. And many of you might not know, but we did do a minimum bike grid plan back in, I think, 2016 or 17. And so we continue to find ways to sneak that into the capital budget, and Michelle works hand in glove with engineering as we go to do our road reconstruction projects to make sure that we're implementing that where we can. Recreation and parks. We hope to expand fitness and wellness this year. We actually think we have budget in the proposed budget to hire a coordinator level position for this. And really start to get out there. One of the things I'm excited about, I know we've talked about at great length before, is utilizing the CLCs more, especially the elementaries. Not a lot you can do as an adult in the elementaries, but you can do fitness. So there's a lot of opportunities there that we think we can do to grow programming. The overall return to rec plan, which is all encompassing. Obviously, how do we invite people back to have fun and use their public facilities again? Brittany and her team and all the community center supervisors are very, very involved with Michelle on the reinvestment program for the community centers and the city pool renovations. One of the things I'm really excited about and would love to talk at a later date with council about is we're going to be doing a park ambassador pilot. What is this? Well, in a nutshell, it's staffing our parks. So beyond the community center, beyond the brick and mortar, it's really equipping Pat Littlejohn with a team, to go out there and be eyes on the park, engaging with youth, engaging with those that are there, not only from a safety perspective, but from an engagement perspective to see how we can better serve the community by staffing our parks. This is a huge movement in Parks and Rec nationwide, of moving beyond the brick and mortar and really having staff hours in open space. I know we all would feel great about our kids running down to the neighborhood park if we knew that a City of Akron recreation team member was down there from X hour to X hour waiting to help structure a great day for kids. We've got an esports pilot, and then of course expanding our virtual program offerings, which have been so successful through the pandemic. Downtown operations, and I promise, Mr. Chairman, this is the second to last one. Downtown operations, Tish Jernigan. She continues to manage, and a lot of people don't know, it's beyond just Lock 3. She manages an interagency operational group that encompasses Akron Police, Akron Fire, but also the business community, Downtown Akron Partnership, and others to keep an eye on downtown from a day-to-day operations perspective. We do plan on reopening Lock 3 this year. Right now, we're doing so under the guise of COVID restrictions. Those may or may not be lifted or changed by the time we open the season Memorial Day weekend, but we are working on that. Tish is working with Michelle hand in glove on the Lock 3 renovation. We hope to really take a fresh look at Winter Blast. We tried some very different things that were pandemic driven this year. We're obviously going to bring back the skating rink, but the point is that what else can we do to leverage the success we had this year? One thing that's been really interesting is we're getting calls now for market rate private rentals of the park, which we've never had before. The reason being is because, unfortunately, people are feeling not so comfortable just yet having large events indoors, but they'd love to have it while the weather's good outside. So we've been working together to put together some market rate packages to maybe add as a revenue generator for Lock 3, at least in the short term until people are comfortable enough using the Night Center or some of the other places that we have in town. And then, of course, how do we continue to leverage and grow our Dora as an attraction to bring people downtown? The Rubber Ducks are going to be back for a season, so she works through all of those. Finally, what am I doing? Well, in addition to just the day-to-day operations and management of all of this, I'm particularly focused on Elevate 2.0, so working to implement the strategies that we've set out, and they continue to evolve, and how do we stay connected and relevant. I'm particularly focused on downtown development. The pandemic has really created almost a complete and utter stop to what was happening downtown. And so I'm going to spend some serious time thinking about that. We're doing a community development ecosystem review right now that's funded by philanthropy. We've hired Joel Ratner to take a look and interview our stakeholders to really give us an outside perspective on how we can improve the community development ecosystem in Akron. As Annie talked about, financial empowerment center growth. I'm focused day in and day out on building stronger partnerships, both here in Akron, but also regionally and statewide and nationally for thought leadership, but also for money and for resources and attracting those to the city. And then, of course, I continue internal and external advocacy to get more resources for our OID initiatives. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to go through the pages or however council would like to discuss.
Mr. Chair, you're on mute.
Is there anything glaring that you see dollar-wise you'd like to just start out pointing out to us?
Well, I think overall, this is a good budget for OID, and I want to thank Mayor Horrigan and Mr. Frecker and Ms. Goodrich for working with us. We put together a pretty robust proposal for them and really put our value proposition before the leadership, and they supported it. So you're seeing an increase in staff. We anticipate, and I've got it written on my board here, which is why I'm looking at it, but we anticipate an additional economist for Helen to staff up in long-range planning, especially as we get more sophisticated with Workday and other things around project tracking, making sure that we are implementing the CIP as you have passed it, all those types of things to get her some extra staff. We're getting an extra economist for the BRE team. Again, I said 3 guys to do the work of the entire city. It's pretty incredible what the output that they generate. So they're going to be getting an additional body to help grow and respond coming out of the pandemic. An additional planner for zoning. You know, as you guys know, zoning is working with council almost every single day on issues, and their staff have been dwindling for quite a long time. And so I was really pleased, again, that Mayor Horgan saw the vision to grow that department and really help us to get after, again, zoning modernization, but also the day in, day out things that you need from us. And then we're also looking to expand around with a landscape technician for the city arborists and parks maintenance. Again, a shared resources with the Parks Maintenance Division in service. We're all trying to achieve the same goal there, and we're really excited about it. And I also talked about how recreation is getting a slight increase, both on a staffing perspective, but also from a general operating perspective to try and do some of these pilots. So overall, I'm very grateful and thankful that we did not get cut. We've been good stewards, but I think we're also putting, hopefully, a good value proposition forward for you for further investment.
I do. You brought up zoning. I do see that there's a decrease in one employee, and it looks like we went from 819 budgeted in 2020 to 681 in 2021. That's page 2-26.
So there's a couple reasons behind that. So in terms of the staffing, we do have the new city planner coming on board. We did have one retirement, and we had a retirement last year, and that person is actually working part-time.
Yep.
So it's kind of one person transitioned over from full-time to part-time. So they basically still have the services of one of the employees that retired a couple years ago. And then in terms of the large reduction in the non-labor category, zoning takes in these wireless deposits for, they have to consult on wireless towers that are erected somewhere in the city. So there's been some large deposits in previous years. We did not budget for the refund of those deposits this year. That's something, if it materializes, we will add budget for that. But it was not put in the original budget. So that's just kind of one of those things that if the dollars come in and they must be refunded, we would add budget for that. So it's kind of a neutral proposition on a cash basis. Like if we get the revenue, then we'll budget for the refund of those monies.
So another way to put that, Mr. Chairman, is that we could have lost FTEs in zoning, but we didn't. We're gonna stay whole going forward.
Okay. Okay. The order I'm going to go in is Mr. Neal, Mr. Malik, Mr. Fusco, and then Mr. Lombardo. Mr. Neal.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hardy, appreciate your report. I'd like to get with you offline so I can understand where this is in the budget. But I like the part about the park ambassadors. To underwrite our costs, is that all coming out of parks, or in light of what we've seen with the discussion about being proactive on the engagement side, as far as cutting down some things that end up falling in our police lap? In light of what we see with the, our school system and the challenges with our children being educated and needing to engage them, of having partnering with them and with this park engagement, maybe looking at what our school system did to underwrite our costs, where they had the mobile units that they sent out so kids could get wireless. I saw you had the esports program. I'm trying to connect the dots to see if we could get this, as they get the recreation. We know that we're going to have to do some heavy lifting. Basically, our kids have lost 1.5 years of schooling, and the parks engagement. Having those partners could underwrite our expenses, what I'm trying to get at, sir.
It's a great idea, and we have not thought about a partnership with APS as they receive funding from both CARES and from this new package that the feds are talking about. That could be a great partnership. I'll follow up on that. I think, as you know, generally the parks budget, recreation and parks is funded primarily from general fund and JED, and so income tax. And so any additional revenue sources that we can bring in, especially if it's non-city revenue, is always a good idea. So I'll make a note of that to reach out and follow up with you on that.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Malik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Hardy. A lot of great stuff going on in OID. Two things that I wanted to touch on. First, the landlord survey. Perhaps there would be an opportunity to come before the housing committee or just touch base one-on-one. And I would love to hear more, because it does sound like, to your point, we are going to reach a point, when the eviction moratorium ends, that there's, possibly going to be a significant, risk to folks losing their homes. And so obviously anything we can do with, future COVID dollars or current programs to avert that, and any way that council can help, that might be helpful to have that discussion. And then the second part is kind of piggybacking off of Mr. Neal's point. I know that I think you wrote something, I think it was sometime last fall, about the dividends that investing in recreation staff can pay with regard to public safety. And if I'm correct, and if you can expound upon this a little bit, recreation staffing has remained pretty flat over the years. And so, what does that look like in terms of the benefits that could accrue if we added several people staffing our parks throughout the city?
Sure. So to take the first part first, we'd be happy to, once that survey's back and Harvard's had a chance to put it all together in a nice bow for us, I think that would be great to have them come to council and present. I think there's no question, as you said, I'm a huge advocate for more recreation resources. There have been numerous studies, I know I've shared with council in the past and be happy to share as they continue to come out, that the ancillary benefits to neighborhoods of having safe, clean, accessible public spaces and community centers is directly correlated with safer neighborhoods. And so, having safe places for youth, having safe places for adults, having safe places in each and every one of our community, really leveraging the fact that we have more park space than most metros our size in the nation, is a huge opportunity. We recognize, obviously, that we have to live within our means. We have to be good stewards. We have to be creative. But I do think, and what we're hoping to show with this pilot, is that by staffing park space, we can create public safety, but we can also create, to Councilman Neal's point, we can create safe places to do really anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be sports related. If you wanted to come as a family to walk your dog, you wanted to do after school time, you wanted to come, I can't tell you how many times, and a lot of you know this, our community centers and the parks associated with them are the spot for kids after school, in between the time their parents can come home and when school lets out. And so we are already trying to do this with the staff we have at the community centers, of engaging youth, most of the time are middle school or older elementary school students who are, whose parents tell them, go to a safe space until I can get home. And that's where they come. So we're already seen as a safe, trusted space. How can we be even better to engage youth, engage our community by staffing parks? There's obviously a lot of, as you described, I've written about it, other folks have written about it that are way smarter than me, and there are studies that prove it. But again, it's trying, I think we need to prove to you and to everybody that there's a value here locally in investing in additional personnel in recreation in this way. But we certainly believe that a strong, vibrant recreation and parks department has ancillary benefits beyond just the enjoyment of them.
Thank you so much for that. And I just want to echo the point you made about the community centers. We definitely see that over at the Northwest Rec Center. It's kind of a place where kids go from Litchfield or from wherever. And, the staffing over there has primarily for many years been based around the dance programs that are there and support great dance programs that are there, but doesn't, have the bandwidth to be able to say, like, how can we find things for these kids who are hanging out to do? So definitely think that that's an area of focus going forward. And thank you for your comments on it.
Thank you, Councilman Malik. Mr. Fusco, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My question evolves around the page 2-10 in the budget booklet. This is reference, it seems as though there's a $622,000 increase from the regional economic development piece, and curious what that reflects?
Certainly. I'm going to invite Steve to talk, or Mr. Fricker to talk about this one, but I think it has to do with, how we're in preparation for Workday, how we've moved our budgets.
Yeah, so there's kind of two things happening here. One of which is that we used to have a separate fund for the bounce facility that has been moved under the JED fund because those were primarily the dollars that were funding this anyways. And then also a big component of this budget is there's a $500,000 business assistance component to this budget, which I'm sure James can expand on that much more than I could, but it's kind of two separate programs is my understanding.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it, Steve. So Councilman Fusco, one of the things, as you know, acutely from your chairmanship and just time at the city, is we consistently, particularly Sam and Brad, when they're out talking to us, our business community, especially existing Akron businesses that are small to mid-market, that are trying to grow by 5 employees, 10 employees, 15 employees, they don't need big, huge mega $1 million incentives for help, right? And they need $25,000 to build a loading ramp, or $15,000 to fix the hood, or $50,000 in moving expenses, to get their stuff from one end of the city to the other. So we had never had previously any fund that was dedicated to helping those types of businesses. And Lord knows, in the pandemic, we got a lot of calls from just those types saying, hey, I'm not gonna go belly up, but I actually want to grow, but I need a little bit of help because the money I thought was going to be there for this growth plan isn't there anymore. And it's small dollar amounts. So we made the pitch to Mayor Horgan that it was time to have some dedicated funds that would allow our BRE team to go ahead and make a decision quickly on a small dollar amount basis to help a business that's already in Akron grow. And that's what these funds are dedicated for. So it's that small to mid-market business that's already in Akron that just needs a little bit of help for a specific need to grow that business.
Yeah, especially now more than ever. No, certainly appreciate that commitment. Zoning fees, I'd like to visit that, not today, not during these hearings, but I believe during the year. I see Director Segedis on, as well as Mr. Antonucci. I'd like for us to look at the fee structure that we have and incentivize developers to come in for that conditional use, what have you, in terms of environmental pieces. Because if they commit to doing some things environmentally, it could save us money in the long run. And I think we really should dive into that and see what we can do to incentivize that and revisit the fees. I don't know if we've increased them very much over the years. I don't think we have, but it'd be interesting to do a little study on that and find out where that would take us. Secondly, the homelessness, task force, whatever it is that you guys are putting together. Like to be part of that conversation, recognizing the planning side as well as the housing side. I know all of us are concerned about that and would like to learn more about that at a different time as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Fusco. Mr. Lombardo.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Mr. Fricker, on every page here, it's the last line item is interfund service charges. What are interfund service charges?
So it's a variety of different charges. So for instance, we have an internal motor pool that fixes city vehicles. So they charge the various city departments for those services. Sometimes it's the engineering bureau does the same thing, where they charge the various capital projects for their time in designing and inspecting those projects. We have some internal storeroom charges, communication services that our communications bureau does. And then finally, we have our cost recovery for our information technology fund, all of the various software programs that they support, which was formerly Banner, PeopleSoft, costs associated with maintaining the city network. Now it will be Workday. Those network costs will remain. So it's basically it's transfers between services provided by one city department to other city departments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Malik, I think you're next in line here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at page 2-15, the debt service, I guess, Mr. Perker or Ms. Goodrich, could you kind of just speak broadly about the outlook of the debt picture? And I don't know whether it'd be possible maybe to get some kind of forecast, whether 5 or 10 years out, that kind of shows where we are right now.
So I could tell you that this is, you'll notice that it goes up slightly this year. This is our highest year of debt service that we have remaining. It does start to drop off a little bit after this year. So, you know, we could provide a kind of a multi-year look, but I could tell you that this is kind of our maximum year of debt service. And then it does begin to fall off a little bit over the next few years.
Thank you. That'd be great. That's great to hear, and that'd be great to see the outlook.
Thank you. Any other hands raised? Any other questions, comments? Looking around.
So
Mr. Fusco. Let me go to Mr.
Yeah, I'll be very brief, very brief. Just trying to go over this as quick as I can. But I know this is federally driven funds, but I see there, and it appears as though that we're going to lose the summer lunch program.
Well, there's actually two separate programs there, I believe. So let me try to find those. Yeah, so there's one on page 224, okay. And then there's one on page 225. So yeah, there's just we had a small closeout cost that we had to do on last year's program. So it does appear as a page, but really there's typically we have a separate program each year.
I can confirm we're still doing it, Kelsey.
Very good. Other questions, comments? Thank you, Mr. Hardy.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
It's nice to see you standing still. All right, Mr. Fricker, let's proceed ahead here.
So next up is going to be our Public Safety Department and Charles Brown.
Welcome, Mr. Brown.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and council, other council members. Just wanted to share real quick my congratulations for the members of public safety for all the calls for service they answered during the COVID pandemic, and I'm still answering. Just a couple things I want to just share as far as goals for the department overall. Is to work continually with the council and the community members on reimagining public safety, looking at recruiting and training a diverse workforce, and then our development, professional development for the department. I noticed on the sheet that we have on page 4.2, it starts with safety communications. So I'm going to invite Captain Brian Harding to share just a couple goals and then be available for any of those granular questions you have about his area of responsibility. Captain Harding.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. Just 2020 was a unique year for all of us. I know that we were no different in safety communications. A couple highlights for us: we handled 163,000 911 calls in the communications center. In excess of 381,000 total calls came into the 911 Safety Communications Center in 2020. Another highlight was hiring. We were able to hire 14 additional technicians in 2020, as well as a CAD and record management admin who will support their communication center, police, and fire and our records product with Tyler. So those are just a few of the highlights of 2020. When you have a chance to look at our budget, you'll also see that it's pretty flat. I think the main difference in there is the additional pay period and the contract pay raises. But I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you may have about the Safety Communication Center budget in general.
Questions, comments? Looking around here. No?
Chair, I can see that Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Okay, sorry about that, Shamus. Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Captain Harding. I definitely appreciate the work that's been done in safety communications. I just looking at the budget, Is there staff being added in safety communications this coming year? I know that that's, adding dispatchers has been something that I believe happened last year.
Yeah, we were going to have another class starting in April to finish with some retirements and resignations that we've had. So we will have another class starting the beginning of April.
Okay, but the actual number of folks is remaining steady, or?
Remaining steady, but we're going to max out to where our budgeted number would be this year.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
Mr. Fusco.
Yes, thank you. I know we had discussed consolidation, I believe in Talmadge. Just curious briefly where we're at.
So the plan is still moving forward to relocate to Talmadge. That would probably be in 2023, but we would not be consolidating with their dispatch center. The COG would be a separate one shared in the same building is what we're working towards today.
Any other questions, Mr. Chair?
Looking around, I do not see anything. I'll just ask you to proceed.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to start next. The next person is going to be the Acting Chief of Police, Major Jesse Leeser. He's going to share a couple of goals for 2021. Then we'll entertain any questions about the budget. Major Leeser.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. A couple of the interesting items of note I talk about is our efforts to continue to make relationship with the community a high priority. We'll continue our park and walk programs and also with officers' attendance and community events being a priority. We'd like to host our second iteration of the Citizens Academy, evaluate that process and develop it for future classes. We want to refine our operations process to leverage our neighborhood response team to address neighborhood issues and become a more effective connector between the community and the city, the police department, and social services. Always striving to improve safety in the community and use collaboration with other agencies to enhance response and investigative efforts when possible. Specifically, our sexual assault kit initiative and our sexual assault cold case initiative, and seeking grant funding when possible. Also continue work with federal, state, and local partners to fight the opioid crisis, remove harmful drugs and weapons from our community. And also want to provide professional development opportunities and ensure high levels of officer competency through training and other opportunities. I want to host our Leadership Academy for new and aspiring supervisors, our in-house training to beef that up to include TASER recertification, field training officer training, bike patrol officer training, and also look for outside training opportunities with BCI as far as Master Criminal Investigator designators and Master Evidence Technician designators. Also, Police Executive Leadership College will be core, negotiating training, and also the FBI Academy if possible.
Very good, thank you. And going back, the rape kits, that initiative, I'm not looking at the right piece of paper right now. It seems like there was a big jump in dollars there. Am I correct?
We have grant funding that pays for that initiative and pays for the investigators now. We do have a small matching portion of it, but this year we plan to pursue another grant to continue to fund the cold case sexual assault initiative.
Okay, and then with the in that we've gained some additional funds for a COPS program. Is it going to look any different in the neighborhoods for us as far as face-to-face with police officers and citizens?
Yeah, the COPS funding I believe you're talking about would allow us to, we're looking to hire a dozen more officers. That would be our neighborhood response team, part of it, a task force officers, and also Project Safe Neighborhoods with the FBI. So that grant would allow us to kind of meet a lot of our core goals.
Okay, thank you. Okay, looking around for comments or questions. Looking for any hands that are up. I do not see anything. Sarah, help me out. Oh, Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Major Leeser. I guess I had a couple questions. I think the first is kind of about staffing. I think that obviously it's such a challenge, and one of the things that I heard in the Reimagining Public Safety discussions was that there's kind of a tug, if you will, between patrol and sort of the specialized units throughout the department. And, obviously calls for service create, sort of a huge draw on patrol. And then obviously the needs with regard to whether it's, QRT or anti-violence or what have you, obviously draw those needs as well. So can you kind of talk a little bit about the staffing reflected in this document, and then kind of how you think about staffing levels going forward?
Thank you. It's a great question. Staffing is always a concern for the police department. We're coming up on some of our biggest years of turnover that we've seen. When I came on, we hired a class of 50 after me. I think we had a class of 40 before me. We had huge hiring, and now that's becoming to the point where those officers are now retiring, and we're looking to refill those ranks, so to speak. We have an academy going on right now. It's a small one. It's a dozen officers. But that falls on the class we had last year, which was 45 officers. But even with that addition, even today, we're still short on staffing of officers. And so you're right, we have to balance, where do we place employees to most effectively serve our mission statement. And so there is a balance between having enough patrol officers to respond as first responders for calls for service, and then also have the support detectives that will be able to do these shorter and long-term investigations. So, for example, an officer can respond to a burglary and can do an initial scene handling, but the long-term investigation of following up with suspects and evidence and working with Bureau of Criminal Investigation falls on a detective to do those things. So we need to be able to balance having enough people on the front end to handle the calls for service, enough people to have the engagement responsibilities that we need, but we also need to have enough for the detectives that work with not only inside the police department, but they work with our federal agencies to prosecute the larger felony cases.
Thank you.
Maybe just to follow up on that real quick though, I'm sorry, but our goal this year is to have another recruitment campaign to start soon, which will also start with having another test to administer, and with a much future goal in 2022 of having 2 classes put on for our academy. If we've looked forward over the next 5 years, and if we can't get ahead of the hiring curve, we'll be short every year of officers for the next 6 years. But if we can get two academy classes going, that will actually help us get us up to our optimal number of employees.
I'm curious, what's the racial and gender mix on the new folks that are coming in?
I don't have that with me right now, but we can make sure we send that information over to you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe Safety Director had something he wanted to interject, and then I could jump in.
Thanks, Mr. Neal and Chairman. Just want to let you know we are working, the division's working closely with finance to see what the budget can hold. So just wanted to share that.
Right. Yeah. One thing I'd like to point out is that on paper, what this is showing is a slight reduction in the police department. That's largely a function of timing. And, as Major Leeser said, we just hired a class, and we're kind of at the point where they need to give a new test in order to hire additional officers. And that probably will not take place until next year. So this budget reflects basically hiring this latest class of 15, giving a test this year. And then, as Major Leeser said, we would have, 1 or 2 classes come on next year. So, I just want to explain why that looks like there's a slight reduction. It's largely a function of timing.
Okay, now let me come back to Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Major, I was wondering if you could, or Mr. Brown, if either of you know how much overtime is in the budget for officers. That's my first question.
I believe it's $2 million is the overtime budget. Mr. Brown, you can correct me, or Captain McCosey if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I believe that's a good number. That's the number that we had talked about during early discussions.
Do we stay every year? Do we stay in line with that, or do we go over?
We had surplus last year. We didn't use all of our overtime budget.
Okay. My question is pretty much asking us to look at public safety in a holistic manner. I mean, we touched on it when Mr. Hardy was talking. And we know there was much discussion over this past year. I mean, we're almost on, we're approaching the end of, I don't want to say anniversary, but the civil unrest that rose from the George Floyd murder. And there was a lot of discussion about how we can, and this is what led to the reimagining public safety across the nation. And one of the things was engaging our community and looking at this from a holistic manner on how we could take a lot of the burden off of the police department. Excuse me, but I got to say it this way. I've got a cousin that is a teacher, and she said she realized how much she was stressed because she was able to teach virtually and she was able to just teach. But she said now that she's going back into the school, she has to be a counselor, she has to be a nurse, she has to be a disciplinarian, all these other tasks that are heaped on her because of what we've heaped on our schools. And when she said that, it made me think of our police officers. They go to be police officers, not to be mental health workers, not to be suicide prevention counselors, all the other things that are heaped on them. And so the thing that came to our discussions was, how can we, I believe in the report that the Devil Strip did, and this is across the nation, only about 20 to maybe 30% of our calls are actually ones that require policing. Now, if you've got 270,000 calls, that's still 50-something thousand to 60-something thousand plus calls a year. That's a lot of calls for safety. But those other ones that we're heaping on our police, I'd like for us to look at our park and rec. We had talked about if we add more there, and working with our community, can we save some of that stress on our police department? And I know there was an unpopular, I never liked the term of defund. That's never what it was. It's about how we could reallocate dollars. And it's not just with police. Chief Tucker had shared some information with me on how many times the fire department are called out to help somebody light their pilot light or put in a light bulb or help. These things can be handled a different way. So what I would like for us to do, I know we can't do it before we approve this budget, but I'd like for us to keep it in line so we can extract from this budget on how can we do a more holistic ministry to our communities, taking stress off of our police, off of our fire by incorporating social workers, mental health workers, and community ambassadors to alleviate this. If it's just taking a flat 0.25% across the budget as a whole, or looking at taking those calls off of fire, off of police, and reallocating those dollars, not having to cut anything. I'll stop there. But I will say I'd like for us, if we could get someone from police, from fire, council, and for the community, and for the finance department. There's a lot of good data out there. I believe we could come up with a solution that will greatly enhance and leverage the work of both departments and better serve our community.
Let me answer that, Mr. Neal. As Mr. Hardy was talking about the park ambassadors, I think that that's a wonderful idea, and I think it's also an opportunity when we get staffing levels to what they should be, to partner with Pat Littlejohn, who's a great ambassador in the community. So those are things as I took notes on that. So I learned about that today from your idea. But we are working on some different things within the department that we can absolutely be able to share at a later date. So be happy to do that when, like you said, I'm sure that this won't happen before the budget is passed, but still like to have a conversation about and share with the council on some things we're working on through some initiatives that we've already started.
Thank you, sir.
I will say that maybe, and obviously I understand what you're saying, Councilman Neal, about the calls that might not be particularly rated as police-related calls, but we always try to make even those as a opportunity to make a community engagement. But sometimes it's nice when it's not necessarily a call where you're going to have to make official action on, but you can just pull up some kids playing and have a quick talk with them, engage them and move on. So sometimes those calls can be a nice break from the other calls, the ones you have to go to, that can be the ones are stressful, put your life on the line every day kind of calls. So it's the break. Obviously you don't want to run ragged with them, but you know, when you take them as an opportunity to still engage the public, you know, the lady that's home alone when her power went out, you know, and she's nervous, and we were able to there to help her light her some candles or find a flashlight. You know, those make you feel good as a civil servant, and they're not always bad. But I do appreciate what you're saying. Absolutely.
Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to kind of build off of Mr. Neal's point a little bit. And, you know, I know that this was also discussed in the Reimagining Public Safety Prevention Working Group. I mean, I think that I certainly understand the mentality, the understandable mentality that when a call comes in, we don't necessarily know what the situation is. And often it may end up involving some kind of danger. But I guess, you know, as we see,
Mr. Malik, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Someone on the call needs to mute. I'm not sure who that is, but we're getting a lot of background. Oh, okay. Mr. Neal. Okay, very good. Taken care of. Please proceed, Mr. Malik.
Sure. Thank you. But I guess what I was saying is that, you know, obviously there are calls that you know, may not even seem to need police response or an armed response, but ultimately do. And I know that there's an understandable sensitivity around that because we want to make sure that everyone is safe, right? But I think, you know, as we see this trend around the country of looking at whether there are some calls that can be spun off to social service responders or you know, recreation or whatever, I guess, you know, to me, it really should start with some kind of pilot program or just kind of, you know, delving into that and seeing, are there some things where we can, you know, look at maybe one day a week, these calls will have a joint response, or these calls, there's a social service person through CSS who might be able to take the first response to it and look at what's going on around the country in terms of those programs. You know, I think it's not something we can do in this current budget, and that's probably something that we'll need to look at going forward. But I really just want to emphasize that. And then the second thing I wanted to say is, I know another discussion in Reimagining Public Safety was trying to make sure that at least everyone I think it's about 110 officers are CIT trained currently. That was, I think, as of the end of the year, and 80 some of those are in patrol. But one of the recommendations was making sure that really, hopefully, every officer within patrol can be, or every officer interacting with the public can be CIT trained. What does this year look like in terms of training for CIT, and how can we build towards that?
I'll kind of maybe just build upon the CIT as a structure of what we do. That program started in Memphis, Tennessee, and even in there, they don't have 100% patrol trained on it. It's not the design. The design is to have almost a specialty, and so you'll have those core officers that receive that core training because it's very it takes 40 hours just to get you trained, and then there's the annual training that falls on top of it. So you have a small, highly trained group of people who are designated on our CAD system as CIT officers. So when that type of call comes out, it's like if a traffic accident comes out, you know, and it could be a fatal. We don't necessarily send a patrol officer that. We're going to send somebody that has those traffic accident investigative skills. And we don't train the whole department on it. We just train a small group of officers because that's the need. Now, same thing with CIT. It's the whole design behind the program coming from Memphis, where it even started, is not to have the entire patrol, but to have a core group trained on it. Now, that's not to say that everybody in patrol understands CIT and everybody understands enough of it to be competent and to have great interactions with people that might be in crisis. And because just showing up on calls with partners that are CIT trained and you listen to see how they interact, you're going to gain some knowledge as well. But the idea behind it, though, is to have designated officers that are outlined on our CAD system that are available to respond to those types of crisis calls. Every officer on the street receives training in de-escalation techniques, training in mental health, and they have enough of a general knowledge to deal with it. But when the specialty needed or somebody's available, we defer to CIT as well. CIT is put on by the ADA, or excuse me, for the Summit County Mental Health will put on the training program. We are only allotted a few spots each year, and we always fill up those spots with officers because we realize it is great training, but it's not something we can push for more training because we're kind of at their beck and call. And not that we need more training necessarily, because we do have a good portion of our officers, and I would say probably more than most police departments have trained on them. But our philosophy is to have them designated and they respond as available, just like a traffic accident investigator respond to a severe accident scene.
Thank you very much, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, looking around here. Ranger Leisure, thank you very much.
Chair, I can take
I think Mr. Councilman.
Yes, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, sir. I did have some questions. It was kind of hard to follow the budget. Had a question, just, you may have said this and I may have missed it. The Child Safety Fund with Akron Public Schools, is that where are we reimbursed for that? Is that officers in the school or?
Yes, that is correct. So that's the officers in the school. So this year we have 8 budgeted. And that's partially because typically, and there's actually more SRO officers than that. I think we normally have around 16 officers, but there's 8 funded by this particular budget because that's what we think the revenue is going to be. COVID has impacted the revenue that comes into that fund, both in terms of the officers not being in the schools because the schools haven't been open, and because of the traffic camera program that we run. And that is a portion of the revenues that has not been operating as well. So, with school getting back in session, we expect that to pick back up. So we've budgeted a smaller amount than we typically do there, just because we don't think the revenues will be the same as they have been in years past.
Okay, so that is a revenue. I thought it was an expense. It's a revenue.
Well, so there's the funding source in the Child Safety Fund is twofold. One, we do get reimbursed by the Akron Public Schools for a portion of those officers' time, and then 2, the revenues that we generate from the school zone speeding program go into that fund to fund those SROs.
Okay, so right now we allocate a certain amount out of our budget, and then we're reimbursed from Akron Public Schools for a portion of it.
Correct.
Where do we see that those dollars that come back from Akron Public Schools?
They're in that budget right there. Yeah.
Okay. So I can be educated. I'll talk to you about that offline.
Okay.
There was another thing. I made a note. Number 538, property monetary evidence. Did we cover that? I think that was under the police.
Correct. Yeah. So that is the
forfeiture funds.
It's not. Yeah. I mean, it's the funds that are held, by the police department after funds are seized, and to the extent that they are returned back to the person that was arrested, those expenditures go through that fund.
Okay, so the dollars that were shown coming out of that fund, those weren't us using them for a program.
Those were being returned back to the people that were arrested. Yeah.
Okay, because I know we had these conversations with Chief Ball, and may have had it even before him. I know the law department, they had sent us some information. Those funds, we can use those funds. There is some fine details on how you could use them. But I know one of the things we had talked about, and I'd like for us to keep on the table, is that those funds that come from wherever those funds came from, if they're sitting there, because if it's still the way it used to be, I think we had close to $1 million sitting there, that the communities that have been adversely impacted by the conduct that led those funds being seized, that we start looking at using some of those funds for proactive engagement to prevent that type of action. I think under the guidelines that were emailed to us, that is permissible.
Councilman Neal.
Yes, ma'am.
Posey and myself as well have met extensively with the law department on these funds, and there are some issues that we can kind of discuss you probably offline with being able to use those funds for the usages that you're describing. So Captain McCosey, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that covers it. It's important to note also that in this case, when we're talking about the budget that's there, these are not funds that have been forfeited or that are subject to a judgment. These are funds that were being held. And in our case, just so it's understandable, it could be anything. It could have been a victim's money that we found. And so anytime we're dealing with money, we have to tag it and we have to account for it in this way. So we're not just talking about criminal activity that resulted in somebody being arrested. We took this money. This is just being held until the case is adjudicated or until we can get it back to the victim. So this is not, I think this is a little bit different category than maybe you were thinking of. There's other categories that have to do with forfeiture. This is not forfeiture.
Okay, well, I would like to get for council to be able to get a holistic understanding, because I remember, I think it was at that time, I don't know if it was Captain Capers, or I don't want to give him the wrong title, because it was about a year or so ago. He came and we were trying to decide, because we had this money sitting there and it was just doing that, just sitting there. And we were looking at being able to put it in some kind of fund to get some type of dividend from it. So as we look at this, how we can fund new ways of community engagement and be more proactive, I would like for us to really come to a real concrete understanding of how we can utilize those funds in whichever way we can to address the needs of the community. I'd appreciate that.
Yes, yeah. And I think we did a lot of research on this and we had many meetings with the law department, and ultimately there was a legal issue that came up that, and I apologize, I can't explain it that well, about why we couldn't go through the process of then utilizing the funds in the manner that you're explaining. But I can try and get someone from the law department to give you a better explanation of what was determined last year.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve, just to come back to something we were talking about a minute ago, just maybe for some of the members that might not remember, it's been a dozen or more years ago. We have everything that we have collected off of speeding cameras. That money goes back into
it must be sent on child safety. Yeah. So
right.
we've chosen to to fund the SRO program. We've done, sometimes we have funded crossing guards out of that fund.
Right.
We've also done some equipment, traffic signals in school zones, that type of thing.
Yeah, we've done a lot of traffic signal. I think we pretty much touched all the schools, but that's just, that was one of the points when we passed that years ago.
It's just for school zone related expenses, correct?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Amobian.
Mr. Chair, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I somehow got kicked off and got back on, but I wanted to address the issue that was brought up a few minutes ago about the CIT officers. One of the things we were doing as we reimagining our safety forces was trying to make sure that we had more officers that were trained in CIT. And that is what we were talking about. And I think that's what Councilman Malice was talking about. And the Adam Board has agreed, along with my agency, to provide the training, because we feel that if we have more officers that are trained in this, it would be helpful to us, because there are so many things that officers deal with that have very little to do sometimes with policing. And it's more social services and how you handle some of these individuals who present challenges. So that was one of the things that my committee, prevention, came up with, is that we have more officers, if not all of them, trained at any given time. It would be nice if they all could be trained. And especially with the Adam Board and my agency, where most of the training occurs, would be willing to do it to make sure we get that need met. So that's what that was about. and it's about just rethinking how we have done it. I realize what he's saying is that they've had certain officers trained to do certain things, but we believe through our exploration of our committee that it would be nice if all the officers had this training.
Yeah, having the available spaces is key. So if they have extra spots to train officers at the ADM, obviously we'd be interested in that for sure.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
I think an offer was just made to you,
Yes.
Major Leaser. So
I'm gonna go ahead and start lining some people up. You have to seize an opportunity when you get it. So.
Absolutely.
I got a lot of witnesses too, so it's good news.
You have a whole screen full of witnesses here.
Yes.
That's right. Okay. I'm looking around for any other comments or questions. I'm not seeing anything. So again, thanks, Major Leaser. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Malik has his hand raised now.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Malik.
Sorry, just one final point. With regard to COVID, I know that we're lucky now that finally our officers are being vaccinated, as we wish that had happened earlier. But is there anything in this budget in 2021 in terms of new expenditures for COVID related things like PPE or other kinds of equipment or material?
I believe there is one grant funded program related to PPE within police. I'm trying to find the page now.
It's the CESF. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yeah, let me find it here.
Hey, Cap, do you have the page number?
I'm looking because I closed it up.
If you don't, that's fine. I just thought maybe you had it would be easy.
It is page 5-28. And
Coronavirus emergency supplies.
Right.
yes, sir. So within that, I'll start and then Steve can finish. Within that, we do have some room for a little bit of overtime there to cover when we have somebody that gets sick and we have to cover it. The remaining portion of it is part of our other supplies and other issues that we have to cover. So that does include PPE, money for PPE, and we get that reimbursement through that grant.
And I have nothing to add to that yet.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you, everyone. I think maybe let's see, we're at 5 o'clock, but we can continue on here.
Okay, if with your permission, I'll continue. And Chief Tucker is going to be very brief, because I know the time has been noted. So Chief Tucker, if you could share one goal for your division, and then we'll go over the budget and answer any questions. Chief Tucker, please.
Absolutely. And thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. The one goal I want to share with you is we want to continue, despite COVID, to deliver the best possible service for fire suppression, to reduce fire deaths, fire injuries, and property loss, and to continue to provide effective first-class emergency medical service through our EMS program. And with that, I would be glad to entertain any questions you have.
What new equipment's coming in this year? I'm looking at, I don't do a good job of keeping track. What do we have new coming in this year? I know that's kind of outside of maybe this budget, but
I will defer to District Chief Kaut. You want to tell him tell committee members what we have new coming in, please?
Yeah, absolutely. When you ask what new is coming in, could you be a little more specific,
we have engines, we have ladders. What all do we have?
Oh,
as far
absolutely. So we have just recently placed an order for a new ladder truck to replace a 20-year-old ladder truck, and then two of our busiest engines, engine 2 and engine 4.
2 engines. Okay. I should know this, but we were in the moment and I wanted to ask.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we just placed that order and these trucks are custom built, and we won't be expecting them until sometime in early 2022.
Okay. All right, questions or comments for Chief Tucker? I know everybody wants to say thank you for all you're doing. Appreciate, especially during this time. I mean, situations you have to go into with COVID, whatnot. Thank you so much. I'm looking around, Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Chief Tucker and Chief Kraut, I think 7 new positions in fire are being added, and there's currently hiring process is ongoing. Can you kind of talk about kind of this similar to the question I asked police, kind of how are you thinking about sort of personnel levels and where those personnel are going to, those new positions are going to be, and that thought process going forward as well. I guess it's not directly on topic, but the sort of diversity and recruitment efforts as well.
Absolutely, I can speak to that a little bit. Currently, we are 25 firefighters short of what our full strength number is. Our full strength number is 363. With this test that we just gave, we are looking at this point to hire 25 new firefighters to get us back up to full strength. But that full strength number, 363 firefighters, has been reduced over the years because of budget constraints. At one point, our full strength number of firefighters was 401. So if we are able to add 7 additional firefighters, that would be a big help to the firefighters that we have on the line that come out and actually serve our public, because we really are, I should say, we have already reduced the numbers that we have of personnel to try to be more budget conscious. And did that answer all of your question, or did you have something else?
Well, yeah, that did. I guess the only other part would be the sort of ongoing diversity and recruitment efforts.
Oh, ongoing diversity. What I can tell you is we had about 1,200 people sign up to take this test. Of those 1,200, only about 600 of them actually signed up to come in and physically sit down and take the test. So they had to schedule a time, and only 600 people did that. And even of that 600, only about 490 showed up and physically took the examination. So we're dealing with about 490 potential candidates. And of those, about 21% of them are African-American. I can tell you that about, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, I think about 5 to 6% of them are female. And when you look at other minorities, I think that makes up less than about 2%.
You said that's of the 490 number?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question regarding, Chief, this is probably more so for Mr. Fricker. You may be able to answer it. I'm on page 612. The labor cost that is looks like it's covered by the CARES Act program. My question was, and this may have been said during the administration's piece, there's a $2 million that's budgeted for 2021. Since it's budgeted, was that over and above what we said was the $28 million we had as a carryover, or is that taken away from the $28 million?
It's taken away from the 20. That's part of the 28 that we got last year.
Okay.
That carried over into this year. Yeah.
Okay. So after we take away what we have in the budget, how much of the actual CARES dollars do we have left right now?
So right now we have about $7.3 million. So the plan that the mayor talked about earlier today is we're using about 4 million of it for police and fire safety costs. We're using $1 million for the council CARES Act program, and then the remaining roughly $2 million is for, we have some computer equipment that will allow us to work remotely, and then some additional business assistance, PPE, those types of things.
Okay. So then that will expend all of that $28 million by the
Correct,
time we
yeah.
get to that point.
So,
Okay.
you know, we basically last year, we were under the impression that we were going to have to spend the entire allotment last year until very late in the year when they allowed all of the CARES Act recipients to extend it into 2021. So because of that, we held some of that money over into 2021, and then we are appropriating for it now.
Okay. And so with that being said, I know the American Rescue Plan that Congress just approved, if not today, they talked about last week, they shared it with us in the CED meeting. Are you aware how much of that we're going to get? Because I know it's a little bit more liberal on what we can do with it than the CARES dollars. Based on the way I was using the calculation, it looked like we would get somewhere between $4 to $5 million, but I can't verify that because I don't know if I was doing the calculation right.
Right. So I don't know that we know exactly what we're going to get, which is a good reason why we have not, this budget does not reflect any of that money that is coming. You know, we will, you know, when that money materializes, if it does, we will then appropriate for that. But, you know, until we know more details, this budget does not include any of that money.
Okay. Last thing, when it was, you know, over the last 4 or 5 years, do you know what the total? Well, let me start here first. The $9 million we got in the workers' comp rebate, was that just put back in the general fund, or is that put in our reserves?
It was put in the general fund, which is basically our reserves. You know,
Okay.
so we do not have a rainy day fund. So in essence, our general fund reserve that we have now, that is our reserve.
Okay, so what would we say our reserve sits at right now?
So we started the year with approximately 28 million.
Okay, so that 28 million you were speaking of, I want to make sure I understand. That's not CARES, that's reserve.
That is reserve, correct.
Okay, so 28 million is sitting in reserve. Okay, thank you.
And we had discussed that the other day, Mr. Fricker, because I'd had the question, was that going to affect our bond rating? You said, well, not so much.
Not immediately, no. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Okay, I'm looking around for any other questions or comments, and I do not see anyone's hand up. So Sarah, help me out because we're ready to close this down here. Can't hear you, Sarah.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Okay, Chief Tucker, thank you very, very much for being with us. Mr. Brown, thank you for the work that, you know, we wish everyone could see City Council saying thank you. We appreciate it. We go to bed at night feeling safe when we get up in the morning, knowing that we have the fine crew that we have working for us. And thanks, thanks to all of our council members too. Your questions have been germane to the budget hearings. I really appreciate that because I know I'm a great rabbit chaser, and I could end up talking about, you know, the color of rocks on the planet Pluto, and you've really kept your questions tied in and relevant to our budget hearings here. So thank you very much for that. So if we have nothing else to come before us, Mr. Fricker, you want to meet tomorrow at 3 again?
3 o'clock tomorrow, yes.
Okay, 3 o'clock. And with that, thank you again, each and every one of you, and we will adjourn.